A few months ago, I did a fairly crude video where I tried to take some of the terms at the beginning of the glossary of the Threefold Lotus Sutra and sort of free associate or comment on them, you know, giving some uh, sense of my own perspective on what they meant, as well as reading what the definition was in that glossary. And I never really picked up on it after that first sort of cycle of terms, but I thought I'd maybe do another one. And the term that I ended with was Avalokitesvara, which means regarder of the cries of the world. And I've really covered this cosmic bodhisattva in a number of ways in a number of my videos. And those of you who are into Buddhism will certainly know that the regarder of the cries of the world is the representation of infinite compassion. He essentially is an emanation of Amida Buddha, the Buddha of infinite light and infinite life, and again represents the compassionate aspect of Buddhahood. In chapter 25 of the Lotus Sutra, which is a wonderful chapter that describes the activities and the vows of Avalokitesvara, it is told how he is available to people in all various kinds of distress if they merely call on him, that he will provide a source of support and encouragement. Now, does that mean Avalokitesvara, who in Chinese is called Kuan Yin and later came to be in a female form, is going to produce miracles for us when we're in trouble? I don't think so. I think that really what this cosmic bodhisattva provides is something that we can focus our mind in that can help us reduce the suffering that we may have associated with a particular life circumstance that is giving us distress and discomfort and perhaps pain. But in any case, in the Threefold Lotus Sutra, under the term of Avalokitesvara, it actually references and says, go to regarder of the cries of the world. So we'll do that right quick and see what it says there. That Avalokitesvara is the Sanskrit name of this bodhisattva, and in Chinese, I'll say she because again, the figure transformed from a male to a female form. She's referred to as Kuan Yin. In Japanese, the term is Kanzeon or Kanon, and regarded the cries of the world is described as a perfected bodhisattva characterized by boundless compassion and mercy. Just a wonderful, wonderful concept and a wonderful deity, if you want to think of her in that way, that we can look to in our times of pain and distress as a source of comfort and support. Okay, going on down the list, I'm again just picking and choosing here is the term bhikshu. We hear about bhikshus and bhikshunis. These are monks and nuns, and they constituted a large part of the assembly within the Lotus Sutra and within other Buddhist scriptures. They're generally, I think, characterized as being the followers of the historical Buddha, or again, those who follow the monastic tradition. And in that context, we will recall that within the Mahayana branch of Buddhism, no longer is the monastic tradition necessarily held up as the only legitimate kind of path to Buddhahood, but also the path of the laymen and laywomen, which are the upasakas and the upasikas. It's noteworthy, perhaps, that in some of the recitations that I've done with the translations by Charles Luck, that he refers to himself as upasaka. And that's the way, frankly, that I like to refer to myself in terms of being a layman. You know, I'm certainly not a monk and have no credentials, frankly, whatsoever within the Buddhist tradition, but obviously I'm a devotee and a lay person who has faith in the doctrines associated with Buddhism, and you know, that's my motivation for doing these videos. But the glossary here defines bhikshu as literally it means beggar, which is interesting because I think the concept within countries that emphasize monasticism is that where they get their sustenance, where they get their food, is by taking their begging bowl and going out into the street. So they have the job of teaching the Dharma, and the lay people within that tradition of Buddhism have the job of, supporting the monks and the nuns through, supplying them with food and other necessities of life. So bhikshu literally means beggar. A religious mendicant who has left home, that's certainly a key aspect. And of course, that models Sakyamuni, the historical Buddha, his decision to leave home, which was a very tough decision in many ways, because, he had everything going for him in terms of living the princely life, having a lovely wife and son, and yet he knew that there was suffering in the world, and he was committed to trying to find an answer to suffering. And that's why he left home. And of course, he ultimately, after about 6 years, became enlightened and passed on his teaching to those of us who have followed him. So anyway, a religious mendicant who has left home and renounced all possessions in order to follow the way of the Buddha, and who has become a fully ordained monk. And within Buddhism, there are the sutras or the suttas, which are supposedly the sermons or the preaching that came directly from the Buddha's mouth. And of course, within that we have the Pali Canon and then the Mahayana teachings in Sanskrit. But you have the sutras, and then you have I think they call the Abhidharmas, which are the commentaries on the sutras or the suttas in Pali. But then you have the Vinaya, which are the rules of conduct, a long list of things that, frankly, would be extremely difficult to adhere to, and yet these monks take a vow to follow all these rules, and that's what's being referred here. And that's what they have to do in order to become, as I assume they have to do to become fully ordained. So following that term in the dictionary or in this glossary is bhikshuni, which is, as would be implied by previous comments that I made, a Buddhist nun observing the same rules as a bhikshu. Actually, my understanding is that the nuns had a longer list of rules than the monks. May have reflected attitudes toward women at the time, I'm not sure. Actually, to Sakyamuni's credit, after having rejected the idea of women joining his sangha, his monastery, his monastic tradition, eventually, because I think some of the women pestered him, appropriately so, some of whom may have been his own relatives, that I think maybe even his mother, that he did basically agree to having women join the Sangha. But there are still Buddhist traditions that don't look as favorably upon women and or don't give them the same opportunities within their particular traditions. One of the traditions that I understand in relatively recent decades where women have, so to speak, broken the glass ceiling is in Zen Buddhism, and in particular in Soto Zen. There are a lot of wonderful female, I think what they call them, at least in America, are priests. And also they've risen to take key leadership roles within the overall organization, such as becoming abbots, which is pretty cool. Bodhi wisdom, or enlightenment, or Buddhahood. Well, that's a big topic. They give in this glossary 4 definitions. I'll just read those off. Number 1, the wisdom of the Buddha's enlightenment. 2, nirvana. 3, the way to nirvana. And 4, the Buddhist way. The whole Lotus Sutra emphasizes the Buddha way. And what that means is that within the Lotus Sutra in particular, and within Mahayana Buddhism generally, the notion is that all beings not only can become Buddha, but will become Buddha. All have the Buddha nature, all have the capability, and eventually all will become a Buddha. So all will attain what's referred here to enlightenment or Buddhahood, sometimes referred to as Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi, which I think means sort of perfect, complete enlightenment. The next term here is another big one, bodhisattva. Bodhi means Buddhahood, sattva means living being. So a bodhisattva is a being in the final stage prior to attaining Buddhahood, one who seeks enlightenment not only for himself, but for all sentient beings. And frankly, I probably won't spend a lot of time commenting on that one because it's so, central to all the other aspects of what you see on my channel and what you see if you at all get into studying a great vehicle form of Buddhism. I mean, the whole Mahayana canon, if you will, I think of as sort of a guidebook for bodhisattvas. Maybe it all boils down, if you want to really put it in a nutshell, to the essence of what's described in the Diamond Sutra, where a bodhisattva is somebody who works diligently and tirelessly to save all beings, to help all beings gain relief from their suffering, while at the same time being aware that in an ultimate sense that there are no beings. That if the bodhisattva has the concept of a being or a life or an ego or a personality, then he or she has, not attained that ultimate enlightenment and perspective, that non-dual perspective, that, while talked about in terms of attainment, involves no attainment whatsoever. And that's the paradox. That's where language falls short. Some of the recent things I'm doing in terms of the Suzuki studies in the Lankavatara Sutra hopefully help clarify that point, which is a fundamental one within Mahayana Buddhism. The Bodhi tree is the appellation of the tree under which Sakyamuni was seated in meditation when he attained enlightenment. I've seen videos of the fact that in India, is it India or Nepal? Some of you will know more than I do, where the original Bodhi tree, not it, but sort of growths from off of it, supposedly, are now a pilgrimage site. Certainly understandably so, as to where the Buddha, where the historical Buddha Sakyamuni attained his great insight, and where, when he did, he said to himself, I don't think anybody can get this. And he thought, well, maybe I should just sit here. But then supposedly the gods came down and said, hey man, you got to share this stuff. This is good stuff. You got to try. You got to roll the great Dharma wheel. And so that's when he got up and went on and, met with some of his former buddies and taught the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path. And Buddhism was established from that point on. And we're all the more grateful and benefited by it. And so what can you say? You can't say much because, again, words don't say it. So, what you can do is you can do your chant, your mantra, whatever it may be that's meaningful to you, to express gratitude for the fact that we've been born in human form, for the fact that we've been exposed to the Dharma, to the Buddhist teaching, and that we've come to appreciate it, have faith in it, and use it as a source of refuge and reliance. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu.